Well, our guest on this segment is Marty Quinn, currently a member of the Oklahoma Senate State Legislature. Marty, it's good to have you here, buddy.
Always good to see you,
You know,
Sam.
you're getting to be family. We get to sit down and talk with you almost all the time. It's really terrific.
That's good.
How you been doing?
Everything's good. Family's good. You know, we're wrapping up for the session, so we're headed in the right direction and looking forward to getting back down to the Capitol and trying to correct some things.
I wouldn't have your job. They couldn't pay me enough money to do what you guys are into. And which brings me to my first question with you. Our budget's in a mess, and we're in an absolute mess. What's going to happen here, Marty? We're approaching $1 billion.
Well, I think the number that's out there now is around 870 million. I do think that that's probably an estimate that's a little bit high. I think that they were probably cautious in going into to this year because of some revenue failures that we had off of the last projection. But regardless, even if it was 800 or even if it was 700, we still have a significant shortfall. And some of those one-time revenues are not there for us. So we're going to have to look at other revenue sources. One of the biggest ways of doing that is making sure that some of the tax credits and tax incentive programs are doing what they're supposed to, and if they're not, there's several $100 million out there that we could rid ourselves of if the leadership of the House and the Senate, Governor's office has the will to do that, and something that I've been working on since 2012.
Well, give me an idea. What are we talking about here in terms of things we could cut?
Well, you have an excess, you know, depending on the year, depending on how much is claimed each year. You have something in the neighborhood of about $2 billion in tax credits. Biggest portion of that, about 65% of it, goes to manufacturers' sales tax exemption, and that's done a good job for us. But you know, you leave the other 35%, it's going to places that, in some cases, that are not doing what it should be doing. The biggest one, the one at least that I'm running several bills on this time, is our zero emission tax credit. We've wasted a lot of money. That credit started out in 2001, projected at a $2 million payout. By year 3, we were already paying approximately $10 million out. Last year, I think our payout was $114 million. It takes $60 million to give a teacher a $1,000 pay raise. We haven't had the money, but it's the only reason we haven't is because we've been putting it in places like that that we shouldn't have. And that wasn't started by Republican administrations, but it doesn't make any difference who started it, it's who corrects it.
Well, while we're on that, what was the logic behind proceeding with the last tax cut? I mean, that was money needed.
It was.
And then they knew then we were headed for another shortage.
You know, Sam, I'm not a guy to beat around the bush. I think that the last cut that we actually took was, its end game was much more political than it should have been. The governor was up for re-election. I wanted to have that on the resume, and you know, I'm not faulting anybody. They had already fought that battle. We want to have a responsible level of income tax. But the trigger system, and again, it's one of those battles that when you're out of leadership, you can fight all day long. Sometimes you walk away with a win, sometimes you don't. But the trigger that was set up on that was intended to have an income tax reduction, and had it been set up properly,
while we're on that,
we wouldn't have had it.
Could you give us the Reader's Digest version? What is a trigger? Because I'm sure there are a lot of folks that don't really understand it.
Well, it takes into account, probably the simplest form I could tell you is that, you know, when you're sitting there saying if revenues get to a certain point, then we will be able to afford, you know, a reduction in income, and that just did not happen. Revenues were on their way down. They knew that they were on down. They took the December number. Should have had the system set up to where that you got the number in February, which would have been a much more accurate number. And the trigger that I'm looking at this year is going to build in not enough. Is going to build in enough revenue to take to replace the tax cut, plus $400 and something million in revenue growth. So our highest number in revenue growth is around $6.9 billion.
Okay,
For us to take the next one, we would have to get to 7.5 billion.
we have seen what state prisons are asking for. Now, quite frankly, the legislature set up the prison system the way it is, and they know better than anybody else that money's needed. Privatization of prisons will not cut it. What are we going to do there?
Well, their request, and it's a massive request, but it's building prisons, it's doing a number of different things, and they know that we don't have $1.6 billion. So are we going to solve that this time? I mean, they know full well that we're not going to. But we have to start taking a look at that to where that if we need to replace a prison in McAllister, then we start finding ways to do that.
It's almost as though, and Marty, I feel like I can say this without hurting your feelings, but it's almost like we're following the path or the trail anyway, blazed by Brownback up in Kansas, and it's not working. It didn't work up there. It's not going to work here.
Well, but you have to look at the environment that we're in. I mean, a lot of the things that we're doing, Sam, are things that are of corrective measures. You know, over the last 9 years, we've put in somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2 billion into the retirement system. Why did we do that? Well, because it was only funded at a 47% funding level. Well, now we're up over 70%. Well, why didn't previous administrations, why didn't previous governors fund the retirement system? Why was it that they took out around $300 million out of that system? Why was it that they gave 2 cost of living adjustments to the retirees out of the very fund that they're supposed to be funding properly?
And on top of that, how is it we allow former employees to draw from 2 different pension funds? Because that, I mean, my goodness, if you're still working for the state, wouldn't one suffice?
I would think so. I mean, those are some of the little bitty nuances that need to be looked at. But we've got some big picture items, such as I just named, that we've made substantial improvements in. Had we not had to do that to the retirement system, there's a lot of issues that we would have already taken care of. You look at the difference in the transportation system, 85 to 2005, that budget stayed around $200 million. This year, because of the appropriated dollars and the dedication to repairing 1,200 bridges and miles, thousands of miles of roads, we'll spend somewhere in the neighborhood, unless they get a haircut of some type, it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 550 to 570 million. That's a 350 million plus increase in spending for the transportation department. And the biggest reason for that is because we had let the bridges deteriorate, the roads deteriorate, and now we're having to pay for it. Same thing on the Capitol.
Marty, we got 2.5 minutes left. I've got to know, does the Republican Party want to do away with public education? We are virtually at the top of the heap across the country in terms of cuts to education. Listen, that's money that's needed. That's our future we're playing with there. What's going to be done about that?
Sam, I would respectfully disagree that we're at the top of the heap of cuts, because the number that they use is appropriated dollars. There has been some cuts over the 6 sessions that I've been there in appropriated dollars. But if you look at total dollars, last year we had, for the state, around $24 billion. We had access to about $24 billion. When you look at total education dollars, college, career tech, public ed, something between 14 and 15 billion of that went to education. Of that 14 to 15, you had about 8 billion of that for public ed. All of those other dollars were up, but you don't hear that number. And the other thing that you don't hear about is they want to compare Arkansas and Missouri and Kansas and Louisiana and all these other places, but they only want to compare the things that show a negative outlook for public education. And that's not true either, because Arkansas has about 260 school districts. We have about 520. We pay 100% of a teacher's health insurance. Other states don't do that.
Story in the Tulsa World recently that I think, was it charter schools or private schools got more money than public schools?
I'd have to see that. I don't think that that's accurate. I don't think it's even close to being accurate on charter schools.
I'll send you the article.
Okay.
Because you need to know about this. And I don't know who put out the study. Got less than a minute. Where do we go from here, Marty? What's coming?
Well, there's a lot of individuals that want to do the best job that they can for public education, for transportation. We have 73 agencies. You can't be a one-trick pony. You've got to look at the whole picture. DHS has needs, prisons have needs, and public safety the same way. But we've done I think a relatively good job in all of those sectors with what we've had to deal with. And when you look at the incomes, everybody wants to blame it on the income tax. You're only talking about $100 and something million. And we've looked at budgets as high as 1.3, not budgets, shortfalls as high as 1.3 billion. So yeah, $100 million makes a difference, but it would make a difference too if we didn't have as many superintendents and have as many school districts as we do.
Yeah, and it'd make a difference too if we had not filed as many frivolous lawsuits, in my opinion, that we ended up losing. You know, well, whatever. We can go on and on about this. Marty, thank you.
Thank you.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
I appreciate you,
Sam.
Sam.
Coming in.
Thanks.
Well, you might be surprised to know the need for this group you're going to hear about next is ongoing. It doesn't just end because Christmas did. We'll have more right after this.